Hey guys, it's Mark and welcome to Part-Time British Guy. Alright, what we got is from the Armchair... I apologize. What we got from the Armchair Historian is the American Revolution, but from the British perspective. So let's take a look. Probably going to be doing this in two parts. So if you see a part one to this, you know there'll be a part two. Let's check it out. Come on. Okay. Alright, let's get on with this.
The history of the United States as an independent nation begins with the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Its roots reach back at least 20 more years with the start of the 7 Years' War. The fighting between its two main...
The 7 Years' War? Okay, what was... The only thing that we had before that I remember from my history books was the French and Indian War.
Participants, Great Britain and France, spread across the globe, reaching also their neighboring colonial possessions in North America.
Did not know that. Okay, so France and England go to war, and it also involves the colonies as well. See, I know it as the French and Indian War. I didn't know it as the 7 Years' War. Okay, that's interesting.
By the end of the war, France had been beaten, leaving the British Empire in control over much of the eastern half of the continent. With its biggest competitor defeated, Britain now ruled the seas, as well as a third of all European trade. By all accounts, this was a major win for the burgeoning empire. Yet beneath the surface, the sails of victory were weighed down by the anchors of debt. Amounting to a total of £133 million, the debt marked a
£133 million. I wonder what that is the equivalent of today.
Significant hit to the British economy and pushed Parliament to take drastic financial measures. The Royal Navy, which had helped Britain to victory, was to become one of the primary losers in a series of cuts, which would see its budget plummet from £7 million in 1762 to £2.8 million in the aftermath of the war, and drop...
Wow. 7 million to just under 3 million. So that's a massive budget cut.
To as little as 1.5 million in 1769. These measures, however, only accounted for a sliver of the debt, and British citizens would be forced to do most of the heavy lifting in the form of a series of new and higher taxes. However, the empire would have little time to recuperate. Just as the embers of the 7 Years' War were dying out, a new wildfire erupted when a confederation of dissatisfied Native American nations in the Great Lakes region took up arms against the American colonists settling in their territory. In response, the British government issued the Proclamation of 1763, which banned American colonists, with the exception of licensed fur traders, from settling west of the Alleghenies. Fearing a reaction from the disgruntled frontiersmen, Britain promptly reinforced its North American military presence, further increasing their debt at a rate of £320,000 a year.
Wow.
King George III, the British monarch, now found himself in a critical juncture. His empire needed to find a way out of its increasing debt, but with his people already heavily taxed, and with the budget of critical institutions like the Royal Navy cut to the extreme, the only natural recourse seemed to put a shared burden on his American subjects. Besides, it was only fair that the colonials pay for their way for the added protection they were receiving from the army. The colonists, however, had grown increasingly distant from their motherland, and the Americans would prove unwilling to meekly bow down before the demands of some faraway king. The first signs of dissent came when Britain introduced the Sugar Act in 1764, which taxed sugar, molasses, as well as other imported products purchased at a cheaper rate from sources outside of the empire. The act also forced captains of merchant ships to post bonds and provide exhaustive cargo invoices, while also allowing Royal Navy personnel to search and seize vessels suspected of smuggling goods.
Hi, and welcome to the Part-Time British Guy's Patreon page. If you'd like to support the channel, it would always be for the greater good.
The greater good.
You can do so for as little as $1 to up to $3. That's a way of showing your general support. To give you an example, $1 is equal to 1,000 views in YouTube. So it will be helping the greater good.
The greater good.
Now for $5, you get your name listed in the credits at the end of every video, as long as you support the channel. It helps the greater good.
The greater good.
Now for $7, you get your name listed in the credits and you get a shout out from the Part-Time British Guy on his next video. And of course, $10. You get all the perks of the other tiers. You get your name in the credits, you get a shout out on his next video, and you get to basically suggest a video that he can do as long as it's British based and doesn't violate any YouTube community guidelines. After all, it's for the greater good.
The greater good.
Soon, angry tradesmen were knocking on London's doors, arguing that the Sugar Act was infringing on their right to free trade, set out in a previous charter with the British government. Many colonists were unaware that the Sugar Act was just the beginning of taxation efforts in America. The Stamp Act was soon introduced, requiring citizens to pay taxes on a range of items by purchasing stamps. A similar version of this act was already providing close to half of the budget of the government from the pockets of English citizens, and would soon raise a large sum from its American subjects as well.
Okay, so the Stamp Act wasn't just for the United States. It wasn't just for the colonies. It was everybody was involved in the Stamp Act.
However, these American subjects proved to be of a different mind as mass outrage erupted in the colonies, ultimately leading to the act being repealed in 1766.
Oh, okay.
The British Parliament, worried about losing face and wanting to avoid being seen as losing authority over its American possessions, made sure to exchange the Stamp Act with the Declaratory Act, which stated that Parliament had full control over lawmaking in the American colonies. Soon, another tax on imported items, such as tea and glass, was introduced under the Townshend Act, further incensing the colonists and leading Samuel Adams to write a letter on behalf of the Massachusetts legislature calling for a boycott of English products until the taxes were repealed. Like many others, Adams was outraged that the Parliament believed it had the right to force Americans to pay for the government's expenses without having American representatives in Parliament. Soon, the slogan, "No taxation without representation," would become the battle cry for colonists protesting British attempts to tax the colonies. Back in Windsor Castle, King George followed the developments from America with a remarkable sense of empathy for his dissatisfied subjects. While discussing the Stamp Act, he stated that it first deprived the Americans by restraining their trade from the means of acquiring wealth, and then taxed them. Britain's Prime Minister, however, Frederick North, or Lord North, saw things differently and remained a firm proponent of maintaining Parliament's right of authority over the colonies, which was seen as a vital component of British liberty. The matter of taxation was now increasingly becoming a matter of power and hierarchy. Similarly, American dissent was soon to transform into all-out rebellion. The city of Boston, home of public agitator Samuel Adams, was known as the beating heart of American unrest. Latent tensions against British rule would come to a head on March 5, 1770, when 400 Bostonians harassed and assaulted 8 British soldiers, who, in the heat of the moment, resorted to firing their muskets into the crowd.
The Boston Massacre. Okay, and it's kind of interesting to note, they basically, when doing this, when learning about the Boston Massacre in school, when I was in grade school, basically it was just a crowd of people were, I wish I had my textbook from that time so I could read it, but basically what had happened was the Boston Massacre basically was a number of British had fired upon a crowd, and several people died. And that was referred to as the Boston Massacre. You know, that in its heart was known as the Boston Massacre. The whole crowd of 400 people? No, that was never in the textbook. So that is extremely interesting. Just pocket it right back here. Just
American unrest.
hang on a
Latent
sec.
tensions against British rule would come to a head on March 5th, 1770, when 400 Bostonians
400 Boston. That was not in our history book. It was not in our history book. Now, basically, the Boston Massacre was there were several soldiers. They fired into a crowd, and several of them were hit, and several of them died. I think 5 died. I'm not sure.
harassed and assaulted 8 British soldiers, who, in the heat of the moment, resorted to firing their muskets into the crowd, injuring 6 and killing 5.
Injured 6, killing 5.
News about the Boston Massacre, as the colonists coined the incident, spread like wildfire, and only added to the unrest in the city. About 4 years later, the situation had escalated to the point that Parliament felt forced to enact the Coercive Acts, which included the reinforcement of the Boston garrison by 4 additional regiments of regulars. Contrary to the belief that this added military presence would finally quell the riotous colonials, the sight of the hated redcoats in the streets and the fact that the British soldiers were to be quartered and supplied by colonists only further angered the American public.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the thing, because you know you have to literally quarter like a British soldier or a British officer in your own home. You know, they were, I guess they were barracks, but I'm sure that other men, you know, other soldiers, other regulars, literally were in homesteads, and I have no idea how many soldiers would be to a household, but yeah, I think it would be something that people would not like. Okay, yeah, that was really interesting. So, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? I mean, like I said, I'm just trying to remember back to like my grade school time when I was learning U.S. history and stuff like that. The Boston Massacre was basically, in a nutshell, a band of British soldiers fired upon a crowd of Bostonians. It wasn't. Well, there were 400 of them firing on like a squad of like 6 or 8 men with an officer, you know, so that was like never discussed. So it's kind of, it is very interesting. It's not kind of interesting, it is very interesting. What are your thoughts? Let me know. Leave a comment, and if you like this video, like, share, and subscribe, and share it with your friends. I could use all the subscribers I can get. I'm Mark Stise, the part-time British guy. Bye.